There we go.
All right. So Jillian and Victoria are here today to talk about biofield tuning, and we're going to weave in some grief, and because my podcast, we're going to share this on both of our podcasts. Mine is Grieving Voices and yours is
Grow a Thriving Practice podcast. It's a podcast for wellness practitioners who want to grow a practice. It's all about marketing strategies and also some coaching in there too, because I'm a life and business coach.
and mine is all about grief, and I talk a lot about energy healing work, and so I'm sure that a lot of practitioners who listen to your podcast will also have experienced grief because who hasn't, right? And no
Absolutely.
one has to die for us to experience grief. And so we're going to talk about all those kinds of things today and share on our respective podcasts this one episode. Efficiency, right, is king. And it's like, why record two separate podcasts? So we'll just do this once and done and share it, and it'll be what it'll be.
Totally. Such a good idea. That was Victoria's idea, everybody.
So I guess I'll let you take the floor first because I'm
Okay.
curious to learn what brought you to energy healing work, and then I can share how I found my way to it.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, let's just say I've always had an interest in kind of, I guess, the unseen. I've always been kind of a magical thinker since a child. And I have always also wanted to help people. I remember even when I was really, really young, my mom would ask me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I wanted to be a nurse. And I think it's because I had been to the nurse so many times as a school age kid. I was always at the nurse with a stomach ache or something. And I think I just loved the care and attention. And just seeing the nurse made me feel so good. Like uh she was always so caring in all of the schools that I really went to. So I did actually end up becoming a nurse. But it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. There wasn't a whole lot of care that I was experiencing in that industry. There wasn't the opportunity to care for people. It was really, working with people's medications and following your to-do list basically as a nurse, doing some charting, and just very stressful environment. um I also, let's see, I don't want to jump around too much, but I think what kind of opened my eyes to there being something different than nursing, or something I could even integrate in nursing, was my own health challenges. In high school, I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue, chronic pain, IBS, Lyme disease, Epstein-Barr. So I obviously was not doing very well in high school health-wise. Still haven't really pinpointed exactly um, what created that, kind of group of symptoms. Because I didn't have huge trauma as a kid. I had some trauma. I think maybe what I did with my emotions was internalize them. Um, and so it kind of led to all these health things. So I went on my own healing path after high school, when I was in college, and in nursing school, and just started learning things like herbal medicine and the importance of nutrition and things like that. And while I was in nursing school, one of my nursing professors, she was teaching a side class called holistic nursing, and I was like, well, that sounds cool. And so that was just kind of an introduction to all these different alternative modalities like acupuncture, herbs, essential oils, energy medicine, sound healing. And I just love that class. I was like, this is why I'm in nursing, to be able to help people in this sort of holistic way. And in that class, holistic was defined as basically it's like, keeping the whole person in mind. Like it's not just about the pharmacology and the symptoms that the person is having, but we want to take into account their environment, their mental health, their physical health, their spirituality, and the whole person. So love that class. She saw how passionate I was about it. And she actually invited me to start the American Holistic Nurses Association Delaware. I was in Delaware at the time, Delaware chapter with her. So I co-founded that chapter with her, and we basically networked with a ton of nurses in the area. We had probably like 20 or 30 members, if I remember correctly, and we led that together for a few years. Eventually, I ended up moving to Vermont, and one of my friends told me, because he knew how much I just loved energy medicine, he told me I needed to go see this woman with tuning forks, because she does some pretty cool stuff with tuning forks. And Victoria's smiling because she knows who I'm talking about. And this was Eileen McCusick, the founder of Biofield Tuning. And I had my first session with her in 2011 and didn't really notice a ton during the session. What I noticed was how grounded she was, how just kind of matter of fact she was. And she was working around my body with tuning forks, validating the experiences I had as a child, the emotional experiences, like how I dealt with my emotions, things like that. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And what I noticed after that was just a sense of less anxiety, less stress. My body could relax more. So it was like, okay, I'm going to keep doing this. I think I did jump ahead a little bit with that story, because I think leading up to that, I had, I was in the Holistic Nurses Association, like meeting all these cool nurses and trying all these different things. I eventually ended up healing my chronic fatigue, chronic pain, all, that whole list of things through music. I was going to like different music festivals around the area. And I think their music festivals get a bad rap because there's a lot of recreational drugs going on. I did have my time with that, I'll be honest. But when I was healing myself, I was going to these festivals totally sober and just really enjoying the music. And it did something to my system, like something really, really healed within me. I was also doing yoga at the time and careful with my diet too. But I knew there was something about music that, was powerful, and I wanted to learn more. So anyway, started seeing Eileen as a client. And then it took me 3 years of being her client to finally go, you know what? I think I want to do this. I think I want to be a practitioner of this work. And I became certified, and I tried to integrate it into my nursing practice. But at the time, nobody was really interested in having a nurse who practiced energy medicine. I know that I think it was more accepted in the hospitals, like, Reiki, being on cancer units and things like that. But I was working in mental health. I was a substance abuse rehab nurse, and a psychiatric and mental health nurse. And there just wasn't really any room for it. So I ultimately decided to leave nursing and to just do biofield tuning full time. And here I am today. I don't think I've had my nursing license in like 5 years. Or maybe even, I don't think I practiced as a nurse in 7, but I think my nursing license lapsed, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I love having the background of nursing and all that knowledge, but being able to help people in this way with biofield tuning has really been fulfilling and amazing. And so I'm a full-time biofield tuning practitioner. Well, I should define full-time. That's what I do um, as a career. And I'm also a life coach who coaches other wellness practitioners to grow practices, because I want to see this work out there more and more. And that's my mission. So I have a practice here in Central Oregon, seeing clients in person. And then I also do remote work. And yeah, that's how I got here. Did I miss anything?
Well,
I
because I
did.
talk about grief, I'm
Uh-huh.
going to ask, trauma is what happens and grief is what's left. And we don't have to have these big trauma experiences to have grief. But had you gone through a lot, like some losses in your life around that time? Not necessarily that you would have perceived it as trauma or traumatic losses, but did you experience losses in your life, in your childhood, into your teen years?
Yeah, one thing came up recently that I had this big aha with that makes a lot of sense now. Um, it's kind of a complicated story, but to just make it short, when I was 11 or 12, I remember my dad kind of um disconnecting from me. And I don't know if it wasn't intentional for sure, but I think it was, I became an adolescent, I was becoming a young woman. And I don't know if my dad had some kind of awkwardness about that, or maybe I was just being a brat and he just was like, I can't deal with this anymore. Right. And so I kind of was like, wow, I think that was a loss for me. Of course, I didn't realize it then, but I think it really impacted me in some way. Um, so, and then I think, yeah, I think I've always, like, love has always been something that I really longed for. Um, and I don't know if I came in with, past life stuff around that, but I also remember like my brother kind of being he was being a brother. Calling me, names and kind of bullying me. But I remember feeling kind of heartbroken around, like, I looked up to my brother. I loved, and I still do. But he was 5 years older than me, is 5 years older than me. And I wanted his love and I wanted his validation and acknowledgement so bad. And he would just, you're stupid. Um, He's since apologized for that, by the way. He recognized his bad behavior. But yeah, I think there was some loss in that regard, just like having that longing for love and connection, even as a young child, and being like, where did it go? Where is it? Um, so yeah,
So
there's that.
love wasn't really something that was shown in affection and physical ways, hugs or anything like that. Maybe not even words, or how would you describe how love was expressed?
I think it was when I was, especially by my parents, when I was younger. But I think when I became more of a teenager, that kind of, like I said, I might have been being a total teenage brat. My
Mm.
parents were just like, okay, like, you need your space, we need our space. But I felt it. Um, I think my nervous system felt it, and maybe I was asking for it, but yeah. So I'm
I'm
still kind of
curious.
trying to, like, I'm in therapy now, trying to, like, unwind all of that. Cause it's like, I think when you have a big trauma, it's like, oh yeah, this is the thing that, like,
Mhm.
created the wound. But it's a little bit more subtle. It's like, what was it?
Well, and subtle and ongoing, right?
Subtle and ongoing.
You
Yeah.
know, there's a lot of similarities in our stories, and I'll get to mine, but I'm curious, did your parents have losses around that time that you had those diagnoses?
Mm, interesting question. Um, hmm. Let's see. My grandfather, my mom's dad, that was actually pretty traumatic. Just witnessing her get that phone call. I was only 6. But she got this phone call that he had passed in a motorcycle accident. So it was tragic and it was unexpected. And I remember being in the bathtub and she picked up the phone and I watched her just scream and fall to her knees. And I was like, whoa, what just happened? Like, I'm 6 years old and like, love my mom. And, just like, so as young children are, we're so connected to our mothers, and just seeing her fall apart like that, I think was probably pretty traumatic to my system, now that you mention it. Um, and then her mom died when I was 19. So that was about like when I was having the health stuff, maybe 14 to 23, 22 or 23. So I think her mom dying was right in the middle. And then my dad's parents hadn't died until much later. And maybe there was some job stuff, maybe some loss of jobs or grieving old jobs. Yeah.
It's very like, just listening to you, it's like, "Oh my gosh," it's like, "Are you talking about my story?"
Really?
It's yeah, it's really bizarre.
Wow.
I mean, I had a lot of loss and trauma in my childhood, like, my grandmother had passed away when I was 7, and then my father passed away when I was 8, so it was my mother who lost her mother, and then and actually her dad died, um, the year I was born. So she lost her dad a few years, within 5, 6 years, she lost her father, and then she lost her husband. And so you can imagine she was like emotionally spent. Like there was no emotional connection there. And kind of how you described kind of what happened with you and your father, like he emotionally disconnected from you.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about how you were diagnosed with IBS. I was diagnosed with IBS in my
Mm.
teen years and I needed a lot of sleep and um I was going to go into nursing and then I had my son and didn't feel like I could do like I didn't think I could do both. I didn't have the confidence in myself that I could do both and um it wasn't until 5, 6 years ago that um I discovered Reiki and started to be open to because my healing kind of really didn't start until um I would say until my 30s. 2014 is when like my personal development like just really took off and I thought there was something wrong with me like my symptoms were really manifesting again from the same kind of things that I had not the same kind of things but similar like overall pain
Mm.
Epstein-Barr reactivated like these fibromyalgia like symptoms, GI, like similar to you, right?
Right.
It was, I know now for me, it was grief just coming
Mm.
ahead, coming to a head again. My youngest was starting kindergarten. I'd closed my photography business that I'd poured like 10 years of my heart and soul into. So much change. We had moved, like we had, big changes in my life and wasn't connecting the dots until, of course, after I went through grief recovery and I worked through a lot of my anger and resentment and grief from my childhood and all of that, that I recognized that and connected the dots like, oh, this is what was happening in my life. This is why this was manifesting because grief manifests in our bodies and it either comes out, we're like tea kettles.
Yeah.
We either implode or we explode.
Mm-hmm.
And like you, I internalized everything. And so I was imploding, and then I would have these bursts of anger, these explosions of anger. Um, and to your, when you were talking about, um, oh, I forgot what I was going to say.
That's okay.
um, but yeah, I think a part of it is just connecting the dots for ourselves, like what's happening in my life or what was happening in my mother's life, right? To kind of bring that compassion in, like, and for me to be able to do that and look at my past and look at the relationship I had with my mother as a result of her experiences that changed her, which then changed our relationship. It really helped to change my perspective of her and of our relationship. And I think that's the transforming thing that happens when we are able to connect the dots like that for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes so much sense. Yeah. So how did you find Reiki then? What was the um kind of catalyst there?
I think because at that point I would have been, let's see, that was 5 years ago. Almost to the day. Actually, last Sunday was my 5-year anniversary of my Reiki certification. So
Wow.
yeah, it's and so let's see, that would have been 2019. Yeah, it didn't happen for, I mean, it was 4 years into my personal development. I was taking, because I at the time, that's where I was going to. I thought something was wrong with me.
Hmm.
Very well, maybe you did too. Like,
Yeah,
something's wrong
totally.
with me. I'm so screwed up. Everyone else has got it all figured out and they're all got everything together. And here's me, and I can't get my shit together.
Yeah.
you know? So I was taking different programs and, Tony Robbins and reading personal development books. You see a whole bunch of them up there,
Yep.
and just like diving into learning about myself and trying to figure myself out. Like I was my own like science project or something.
Yeah. Yep.
Just to gain an understanding of like, how did I get here? And grief recovery is what helped me figure that out. But what was happening, the more I was working on myself, the more I was more open to hearing the intuitive guidance I feel like I was receiving. So I actually just had a podcast interview earlier, or not that long ago, with she calls herself an intuitive, but she's a medium, and was telling her that I kept hearing Reiki over and over, and I heard it 3 times, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, the 3rd time, there's something to this." Go to Google, had a conversation with somebody that practiced Reiki, was learning that, oh, there's different lineages, like, what's all this stuff? And I ended up finding a practitioner that I could meet with in person for my certification, and it was a 6-hour drive, but I took it, and I went, and had a really profound experience personally. And okay, I guess I'm doing this, and this is it, and this is pretty amazing. And I went to that was level 1 and 2. I went, finally did 6 months later, I got my Reiki master with her. 6 months after that, I got my Karuna Holy Fire Reiki master with her. Now she offers sound bowl healing classes and stuff too.
Oh.
But it didn't happen until like 2 years ago. So 3 years doing Reiki, just went down a rabbit hole, which seems to happen a lot, and found biofield tuning through some really different, like, I'm like, well, this is bizarre, but this is really interesting. It was with sound, but it was like this machine that you hook people up to, and it could like translate their energy like into sound frequencies or something like that. And that led me to biofield tuning.
Oh, interesting.
And when I found biofield tuning, I'm like, "Ooh, I'm doing this. This is cool."
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, it's just one rabbit hole after another rabbit hole after another rabbit hole. And yeah, that's how I've gotten here. Rabbit holes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
Following
now
programs.
you do Reiki as well as biofield tuning, or is it just biofield tuning or
I kind of
how
have
do
my
you?
own hybrid. Like
Yeah.
I kind of have my own like way that I do it. I bring in elements of Reiki into it. And of course, if, you know, contraindications come up with certain clients, then I use more Reiki, of course. But yeah, but more importantly, I want to say, and I have a question for you too,
Mhm.
but it's helped me do the work that I do. Like, finding energy healing has helped me do the work that I do in my grief work,
Yeah. That
because
makes sense.
it's really heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And so my question I thought of when I was listening to you, and what was actually posed to me on that interview that I was telling you about or mentioned is, because as a child I needed a lot of sleep, and I just I consider myself an empath and
Mhm.
highly sensitive, but not all highly what I've learned is that not all highly sensitive people are empaths, but all empaths are highly sensitive. There's a
Mm.
difference. But would you consider yourself an empath?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the question that
Yep.
was posed to me by this medium or intuitive was, do you, because when she was talking about, because I kind of asked her a question like this, where do you feel like we're all we're all mediums in a way, or do you feel like we're all intuitive in that way? And she was like, there's a person, like one person might be like, let's say you have a person that runs marathons. They're a very physical person. They have to be moving constantly. It's really difficult for those people to sit and be still, right? It's
Yep.
very hard for them to, it's going to be harder for them in her experience, she said, to connect to spirit and to be open to the what spirit is trying to tell them. But if
Hmm.
you have someone that is not as much as the physical in the, like they have to experience the world in the physical way, whereas someone like an empath, it's not necessarily the case. And but she was saying in her home growing up, like her sister is very empathic and highly sensitive, and felt like her sister carried a lot of the emotional weight and almost processed a lot of everybody else's emotions where she didn't have to.
Hmm.
And what that brought, because what she asked me then was like, she said, do you feel like you were processing like your sibling? She asked me if I was a sibling. I said, yeah, I'm the youngest. And she said, do you feel like you were processing a lot of your siblings' emotions? And I said, because my brother is 5 years older than me.
Hmm,
And then my
interesting.
sister is 9 years older than me. And but I would definitely say that I was processing a lot of my mother's emotions
Mhm.
too. And so as an empath, energy healing has been huge for me in the work that I do. And I imagine it has been for you. And so I'll ask you the same question I was asked. Do you feel like you are processing a lot of the emotions and the people in your house for the people in your household that they didn't necessarily have to then process for themselves? Like you were taking it on.
Think that's definitely possible. I know I remember just really being keenly aware when somebody was not comfortable or not
Mhm.
happy or upset or, whatever it was. And I think maybe I processed it, but I also think that that's probably what I internalized a lot to make like, oh, it must be me. I must be the problem for this person. Never really getting much clarity about that. So yeah, I think there's something to it for sure.
Yeah, and just listen, just I mean, it's fresh in my mind because I just had that conversation not long ago, and hearing her ask that question and her saying too, like, you can be there's healers and then there's teachers, and healers can be teachers, but for the most part, healers are the ones that are the empaths and are the ones that are, the emotional processing tanks for other people,
Yeah.
unless we learn how to manage our own
Yeah.
and kind of sweep our own doorstep. And the more that I've learned how to process my own journey in my past, the better I've been able to sit with others in theirs. That's one of the things I say a lot too in my podcast. Like, people that, "Oh, I don't know what to say, to someone who's grieving. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do." And, it comes naturally to someone like me or an empath, right? Just sit
Right.
with people because we can put ourselves in their shoes. That's not, doesn't come natural to everybody,
Yeah.
but you can, you don't have to do or say anything. You can just sit there and be there, right? You don't have to do anything.
Yeah. I think that's for me, like that's where it's so natural for me to connect with anybody. Like I can connect with anybody. And so I never have that kind of like social anxiety that some people have about going out and like, am I going to know what to say? Or am I going to find anybody there that I can talk to? I'm just like, no, like, that's so easy for me. And it's not because I feel like I have a lot to talk about, but because I feel like I can really sit with somebody and listen and just understand them like instantly. And I wonder if like, and then I'm thinking back to childhood, like connection was really something I longed for, and into my teenage years too. Um, and that's why I have the business that I have today is just really like when we do biofield tuning, we are in a very intimate setting with someone, and we're basically like, we're listening to their body, we're listening to their mind, we're listening to, what they're saying. And it's a space that as a client is a very precious and rare opportunity to have somebody listen so deeply to you. And I just really thrive on that. And then having the coaching practice that I have, where I just bring healers together, and we connect, on live calls every week. Right now, I'm also coordinating in-person venues for biofield tuning classes. So it's just something that it's interesting, something that seems to be something that you're lacking in childhood, you can then cultivate later on, like what you're talking about too, with being able to sit with people. Yeah.
How has biofield tuning changed your life?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's interesting because I'm 37 now. And I've been receiving biofield tuning since I was 23. So it's I know that it has changed my life. I just think I would be on a completely different trajectory, like into when I was in my 20s, into my late 20s, into my 30s. Um, I think I'd be pretty unhealthy. So it's really put me on the path to health. And because I think it's been, I mean, how many years is that? It's been 14
14.
years, which is a good chunk of my life. Anyway, it just feels so natural to just be like here. And we're like, um, I remember the moment I knew biofield tuning was helping me when I was in a substance abuse rehab facility. And there was a patient that was having a seizure. And as a nurse, what we do is we tend to that seizure. We go grab the injection of Ativan, stick it in their arm, and monitor vitals and all that. Might have to do the injection again. But it was something that would just stir up my nervous system incredibly. Like, I hated it. I mean, I don't think anybody likes when someone has a seizure, but what it did to my nervous system was like, I was like, this feels like too bad to keep doing. I can't keep putting myself under this stress. But someone had a seizure, and I reacted like I was as cool as a cucumber. Like, I just responded to what was happening in the moment. And I got, a little adrenaline jolt. I think that's normal and natural when you're in a life-saving, situation. But I felt myself come back to like, back to neutral, back to that like centered and calm feeling almost immediately after that situation was over. Whereas before, I would have been totally stuck in that adrenaline state. So that's when I knew. I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is amazing. This has to be from biofield tuning. Um, Also, anxiety just diminished after like maybe a year of receiving biofield tuning. I didn't even know I had anxiety until it was completely gone. I was like, well, this is different. Um, so yeah. And then I met my husband while on this journey. That's a whole other story. Um, but yeah, I think it's changed me in a lot of ways, changed my life in a lot of ways. And also, it's just weird to kind of look back and go, what would life have been like if I didn't find this work? Where would I be living? Who would I be married to? What would I be doing for work? And at the same time, I can't even fathom it. I think I'd find it one way or another.
It's like life is made up of these. Yes, we have these big choices and decisions we have to make, but it's all these daily, collective, minute choices that we also make
Right.
on the daily, for our daily experience. And so what is, like, how has that changed? Like, your daily, like, self-care when you first, in your early 20s till how has that changed now? And you're a parent too, correct? You have
I'm a
children?
parent. Yeah, I'm a
Mhm.
step parent. Yep. I'd say a very dedicated and committed step parent. They're like my own. They just didn't come out of me. Um, but yeah, I think with biofield tuning and with just age, um, decision making has been more about does how does this decision feel in my body? What's a yes feel like? What's a no feel like? I'm really listening to that. And I think probably without this work, it would have been much slower. Um, Meaning that I'd probably, be 37 today and still trying to figure out what my yes and my no felt like in my body. Um, do you know what I mean? Does that make
I
sense?
do. I'm 45. I have a little bit more time, at this game of life than you, but it's like all I could think of was like, "Man, I wish I would have discovered what I know now at 23 rather than, 40."
Yeah.
You know? I mean, and I can speak to that slower pace of growth because, like I said, my journey really started in 2014 when I was just so sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
You just, and I had so many different coping mechanisms in the meantime that I'd perfected because, from a very young age, I had a lot of practice, So it was like it took me 30 years to build up all of that emotional gunk. It
Mm-hmm.
took me much longer to come to the awareness that there is something better that's available for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's really difficult to see that when all you feel in your body is like this suffering feeling?
Right. Yeah. Especially when you're in physical pain.
And
Yeah.
that is one thing too that so many experience. It's again this manifestation of physical pain. And how have you seen biofield tuning transforming people's lives from physical pain? Because that's an
Well,
unseen thing too, and that's another layer of grief, right? Because people don't necessarily see that.
right. That's actually where I started to so I moved to this little town in Central Oregon. It's called Sisters. If you have the opportunity to visit, it's just such a little gem. But that's what I started to kind of notice in this community was there's so many people who are dedicated to their health and they're exercising and they're eating right. It's really inspiring to like be around these people, but still having ailments like, pain in their shoulder or pain in their hip and just like getting totally frustrated with it. And so that's how I started to really talk about biofield tuning was like this is the thing to try when you've tried all the other things. I mean, ideally we try it before that, but for these
Mhm.
people who are doing all their quote unquote right things and still not feeling comfortable in their body because they have some pain or they have some injury that keeps coming back is to let's uncover the emotional origin of this and resolve it from that space and see how that feels. And so I've had a lot of success with my clients and just helping their shoulders to free up or helping their hips to free up or even their breath to free up from working. We don't even necessarily have to understand what it was emotionally that created the tension in their body, which is pretty cool.
Mhm.
But to just like locate it in their biofield and unravel that tension. I'm working with somebody now who um, she's in her 50s and the past 7 years she's just had all the things like kind of like we were talking about she's got some interesting gut stuff going on and blood sugar stuff. She eats so clean and she loves to be outside and hike and do all the things. But she's just really struggling in her body. And so I've seen her 3 times now. Tomorrow, no, Wednesday will be the fourth time. But she said to me, I'm starting to feel more resilient. And I'm like, cool. So that's an example of, how biofield tuning can help clients in that way who have been struggling. And she's still not quite sure about what the emotional struggle was. But like I said, we don't necessarily have to know. I think the awareness is great, but just helping the body to integrate whatever trauma, you know, it experienced, um, can help to relieve people of stuff they've been dealing with for a long time.
And for people that don't know really the intricacies of biofield tuning or what it all involves, can you just talk about from your expertise as a trainer, right? Because you're a trainer too.
Yep. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm a student. I'm very much a student. So put your teacher hat on if you don't mind, and just share with people, because there's some new contradiction or contraindications too, right? There has been a revision to the
Yeah, but
contraindications.
it's a little bit looser now. It's more
Okay.
like we've gone from contraindications to cautions and guidance. And that's really recognizing that each person is different. And we manifest our symptoms just based on our own life experiences. So there's not really a one size fits all um, approach or a black and white kind of thinking when it comes to, can I work with someone who's got cancer? Can I work with someone who um, what's another thing, is on medication, like psychiatric medications and things like that, where we do kind of, I still practice extreme caution as pregnancy. Um, just because now instead of there being one human involved, now there's two. And so we just want to make sure. So biofield tuning can um, allow your body to have like a cleaning response, meaning that this tension that we hold in our body can hold built up toxins as well, just from like the food that we eat, emotional toxicity, environmental toxicity. And so when we get that tension freed up, um, then that body has the opportunity to release that waste. And so people can have headaches or have digestion upset, or kind of a number of things. They're usually pretty mild, but they can happen. And so when we're working with somebody who's pregnant, we don't want to create any kind of discomfort, because it could affect the fetus as well. So um, yeah. So anyway, I think you were asking how this were, or what was your question about biofield tuning specifically? Like
No,
how?
you answered the question, but
Okay.
that
Okay.
leads me to, like, because the hardest thing for me to explain to people is, how does it work distance, right? Because time knows no space or sequence or distance or anything like that, right? So, but that's a really big concept to wrap our head around. And
Yeah.
I think the example I use is when, when you're thinking about someone and then that someone calls you, it's
Yeah.
kind of like that. So how
Yeah.
do
But
you
how does that happen? Right.
yeah.
So yeah. So it is really hard to explain and wrap our heads around, but I kind of think too of like cell towers. I don't know a whole lot about like cellular service, but I was just thinking about it. And the cell tower is putting out radio waves, and we can use our cell phones to contact anybody in the world, right? With it, we're not connect, there's no string connecting our phones, or we're not even in the same time zone. um, but we can connect with someone instantly. And so I think it's kind of like that, like what we are working in waves and in waveforms, what we call it, a plasma, right? Which is, it connects us all. It's a medium that connects us all, plasma, ether. And so it's kind of like when we do this distance session, it's like we're dialing. I mean, we do literally dial someone's number to connect with them
Yeah,
over a
yeah.
distance session, but but the intention connects too, and we can connect with that person's field and work with them at a distance, and they can receive that work in real time. So I don't know if that confused people more than it needed to, but we think about, just using things like cell phones. I don't know how they work, but I use it every day. I rely on it. I trust it. And so we can do the same thing with this work too. And just so everybody knows, with biofield tuning, we have a very firm boundary with this work that we always receive verbal permission to work with somebody, because I just want everybody to know we're not, as practitioners, going in there deciding we're going to work on this person now and they don't even know. No way. We need their permission.
I have been asked that.
Yeah.
I have been asked, yeah, to do that, and I'm like, "Nope, I need permission." Even my own kids, right? They, you know, I ask them or they ask me actually. And I have a lot of clients now too that do you have a lot of clients now too that I love the analogy, by the way, on the tower. I'm gonna use that.
Okay.
But do you, what was my question now? Oh, seems to be happening today a lot. It's Monday,
Kids,
right?
or did it have to do
Um,
with kids, or did it have to do with working remotely?
Working remotely. What was it? Oh, maybe it'll come to me. Um, do most of your clients work with you remotely now?
It's like half and half right now.
Yeah.
So I see clients in person twice a week at a amazing little wellness center here in town. I just love it. The owner's amazing, and she's got great practitioners, including my husband, who is a Rolfing practitioner. Um,
Oh, what?
Rolfing. Okay, so some people know what that is, other people don't. Rolfing is it's like massage, but it's working with the body's connective tissue, and there's a real focus on posture and movement and alignment. Um,
Mm.
that's the best way I can describe it. And usually it's done in a series of 10. So the first session is to release the breath. And then he works from the feet all the way up to the head. Um, and it's just great for people who have, any of the things like postural issues, pain from, not having good range of motion, um, things like that. I was born with my feet turned all the way in and my knees turned all the way out. So I've got these like fascial torsions in my leg and all the way through my body. And Rolfing has really helped with that. So
Wow.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so I 2 days a week at Daybreak Wellness, it's called. And then I have remote sessions the other days of the week. And then I teach biofield tuning.
Do you find that a lot of your clients because a lot of my clients that started as in person now have gone distance, but now it seems like a lot like what I found too, like a lot of them now, it's like maintenance. Like after you've had so many sessions and you've been a client for a while, I think it's better you're better able to tune in to yourself, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I tell people too, is like when, we usually recommend 3 sessions to start. And then after that, if you want to keep going weekly, you totally can. But you start to kind of get a feel for when you're going out of balance again.
Mhm.
Because you have become like, it's like a muscle that it's an awareness that you build of what centered and grounded and neutral feel like. And so when you feel yourself kind of listing off to like, oh, now I'm in this trigger state, or I'm in this state of like anxiety or whatever it might be. For me, my body feels compressed. That's when I know it's time for me. That's when I know it's actually I've waited too long to get
Mm.
tuned. Is when I start to feel compressed and congested inside
Or
energetically.
it's like your chest, like you're just like tightness in your chest where you're not like,
Getting
breathing
that full
deeply
breath.
and
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like that too. And that's what happens, right? When you're kind of like this and you kind of bring your shoulders in and you can't get a nice deep breath. Well, what is oxygen, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
what feeds all of your cells in your body. Give, the oxygen is what your body needs.
Yeah. I just had to take a deep breath when you were talking about that.
Me
That felt
too.
so good.
It's like
Yeah.
like plants, right? What do they need? Sunlight, water,
And oxygen.
and oxygen.
Yeah. Yeah. So how about you, Victoria? What have you noticed the most about your either transformation or the way your life has changed since doing biofield tuning, but also Reiki? Because they kind of happened pretty close together. Yeah.
They did. Yeah.
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 Energy work.
Well, yeah, I think the biggest thing for me too has been being able to tune into myself.
Mm.
Um, just kind of what we were talking about, what happens with clients, that happened with me, right? I was better able to recognize, okay, this, I need to step back, or I need a break. This, all this people's energy is just too much for me right now. It's affecting my energy. Or I'm not making my energy a priority and maintaining that and cleaning it up, right? I'm not cleaning sweeping my side of the street. And so other people's stuff is affecting me. I've been better able to recognize when that's the case. Um, yeah, I just feel more at peace more often than I feel. And then when I'm not, I can quickly, I can shift more quickly too,
Mhm. Mm.
build that resilience like you were talking about building resilience. I think that's what it helps us do as well, and it's in when once we feel the opposite side of suffering or grief or anger and resentment or physical pain, once we feel the opposite of that, there's the clarity, right? Because there's a remembering. You can't forget what that was like. But
Yeah.
when you get a taste of what it can feel like, the opposite of that, well, I want more of that. And so that's where, I feel like being open and curious, following the breadcrumbs. If you're listening to this and you're like, This biofield tuning sounds really interesting," or Reiki, or maybe you've heard about tuning forks or sound frequency a few times, or maybe once, and now it's like the third time's a charm. I don't know, it seems to be three times for me, but follow that curiosity, go down the rabbit hole. I think it's coming to you for a reason. I think these things find us in perfect timing. I can say I wish I would have discovered all of this stuff in my early 20s, but would I have been ready for it? I obviously wasn't, right? Because it didn't come into my sphere of awareness. I had to go through this really slow, arduous, long road, is what it turned out to be. But I feel like it's, I don't know if you're into human design at all.
I've I've just kind of skimmed the surface of it.
Oh, so that can be a very deep rabbit hole.
Yeah.
That's a rabbit hole I've been going down for like about 2 years now.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And one thing that's helped me is to realize just how to best how my energy speaks to me, really, and how it's speaking to other people in a way that I never realized, because I would feel rejection a lot throughout
Mm-hmm.
my life. And what that was, how I feel now, what that was, or how human design helped me reconcile that, is they were feeling my energy. And I feel like once once we start to pull back the layers of our own energy in our own lives and look at the stuff from the past where it can inform us, it's information, it's data, right? And we can choose to look at that and shift our perspective, and then help us to inform us for our future, right? Because if I would have kept dragging my past experiences into the present moment and into my future, I would not be where I am today.
Right.
So I had to look at that to recognize the impact it was having on me, but not just on me. That was the energy I was projecting out to others.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That is a really good point of why at times it is important to reflect and become aware of those patterns, so that you aren't recreating the same thing over and over, especially if it's not serving you.
and
Yeah.
so what do you have to lose by trying biofield tuning or Reiki or any energy healing modality, right? It's what
Yeah.
is it costing you not to?
Right.
Really? What
Mm,
is that lack of awareness costing you?
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's important to let people know, just like the cell phone analogy, like we don't have to understand how it works for it to work.
Mhm.
So if you think it sounds cool and intriguing, but you're like, but how does that even work? Don't even just come try it. Just, then you, with Victoria or me or anybody who, someone that you trust. I think that's the important thing, right? Is finding somebody that you trust. Um, and that might take a few attempts to find a practitioner that works for you.
Just like therapy, right? You
Yep,
know, you're not
exactly.
may not find the first one that you resonate
I
with, and yeah,
didn't.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's just so incredible to have support around you. Now we talked about that holism, right? Holistic support. So what does that look like for you? Do you have the nutritional support, the physical support, the mental and emotional support? And do you have the spiritual and energetic support as well? And making sure that we cover all of our bases so that we are whole beings. But it's when one of those areas isn't supported that we start to lack wholeness, um, in some regard.
that's good. That's
Thanks.
very true. Very true. What
Yeah.
is one thing that you would I mean, that was a great way to end this episode. But is there anything else that you would like to share either about, your, transforming emotion or challenging experiences throughout your life or grief using biofield tuning? Is there anything that you would like to share with those listening about that?
Yeah. Well, my favorite phrase, and I didn't make this up, is you got to feel it to heal it. So when it comes to emotion, we are inherently designed to want to avoid it and or resist it or react to it because it's uncomfortable. Like as human beings, we are like our brains are designed to avoid pain, seek pleasure, and do it with the least amount of effort. So it's an unconscious kind of response that we have when some kind of uncomfortable emotion comes up. We want to either fix it or get rid of it, those things. And so we have to use the part of our brain that has our highest and best interests in mind, our prefrontal cortex. That's the amazing thing about being human, is that we have this prefrontal cortex that we can intentionally decide that when discomfort comes up, that we're going to notice it and we're just going to be with it for, I don't know, like they say emotions last for 90 seconds. I don't know how true that, it's probably like an average, right? But if we just decide to allow that emotion to be in our body for even just 90 seconds, it can do wonders for our health, because it's when we're resisting it or avoiding it, trying to get rid of it, it actually ends up building up in our bodies and in our tissues. And that's where, illness and dis-ease comes into the picture. So that's, biofield tuning has taught me that for sure. To just, when grief comes up or anxiety comes up, notice where it is in your body first. Is it in your chest, in your belly, in your throat? And then not understand, but tune into the frequency of it. Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it chaotic? Is it stuck? Is it open? and just breathe with it, and it'll pass. And sometimes the emotions don't pass in 90 seconds because we've either had them for a while or there's something, acutely going on. And it's like we can go about our day and be present with emotion at the same time.
Or ruminating
Right.
on the emotion, and it's
Right.
over. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
brings up one key point about grief, because I know you're going to share this on your podcast as well, and people have
Mhm.
listened to mine. They've heard it a million times already, but I'll bring it up because it's going on your podcast too. Is that reminds me of, these behaviors that we resort to. We call them in grief recovery, we call them STIRBs, short-term energy relieving behaviors. And it
Mm.
could be things like alcohol or, substances that like drugs and pills, things like that, or shopping, gambling, pornography, um, workaholism can be a stirb. Exercise can be a stirb if, you're using it to avoid feeling, right? It takes you out of that element of feeling when it's like you're chasing this other high, right? As let's say you're a marathon runner. I'm not saying you're running away from something in your life, but could you be? And that's the curiosity I want to pose people with is, are you using this behavior, whether it could be deemed as positive or negative, like running or exercise
Right.
versus alcohol? Are you using that to feel better for a short period of time? Because, yeah, you will feel better for a short period of time, but, maybe some guilt and shame and other things come into play as a result. Well, that doesn't feel very good. Well, so what do you do again? Oh, you resort back to that same behavior. It's like this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So that's where we have to recognize what's happening within us is being we're exhibiting that on the outside. Well, how is it showing up though? Is it showing up as a physical manifestation or is it showing up as a behavior?
Yeah.
Anger too can be a stirb.
Right. Because it's a release. It can be a
Mhm.
release. Right. But maybe not used in an appropriate way.
One
Yeah.
suggestion I just heard not that long ago was a screaming pillow. Have a pillow that you use to scream in
Yep.
for anger. That could
Love that.
be,
Love
well,
that.
I added the part for anger because that's what comes up for me, is that's what I think of is, because how else, you could positively. Like another way for me, with anger too is, moving weights, like lifting weights. It's a great,
Mhm.
great, pushing something,
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love weightlifting. That's
Me
that's
too.
something that has just really helped me to get into my body more because you have to, especially with heavy lifting, like you have to pay attention to how your feet are on the floor, to where your breath is, to what muscles you're engaging. Oh, it's been such an amazing tool in the toolkit, weightlifting.
And, like I'm in my 40s now, so it's like to get this, like, have this aha, like, I don't have to do any more cardio. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
right?
yeah, sign me up. I lift 5 days a week. I'm like, yeah, bring it. I
Yes.
absolutely fell in love with it. Fell in love
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah, me too.
What's interesting too is I used to be a gym rat, like in my early 20s. Um, but I would also then I'd be at the gym for like 2 hours, doing cardio and stuff like that. But then I'd also be at the bar for like I'd shut down a bar too. So it was like, okay, those don't really equate, do they? It was like
Okay, yep.
one behavior after another, that I was trying to just avoid what I was
Yeah.
feeling.
Was the gym going to the gym in response to like guilt and shame about being at the bar, or was it kind of
Probably
like
on
that
it.
like
Yeah.
cycle?
Yeah, it was a cycle. It was a cycle because I don't think, yeah, come to think of it, yeah, I think it
Mhm.
probably was. It made me feel better. Well, I'm doing this. I might be doing this later, but I'm doing this now.
Yep, yep, yep. It reminds me sometimes of when I have one too many cookies and I'm like, all right, well, I think I should go for a walk now or something.
Yeah, and that's a good question. Like, what's motivating me? I think that's
Right?
the deeper thing. Like, what's motivating me to do this? Is it because I'm feeling guilt or shame around something else? Yeah,
Yeah.
right?
Or is it because I love myself and I want to, you
Mhm.
know, um honor my body and
And
feel
that's
amazing.
And that's a much better intention to go into it with, right?
Yes.
And I think that was one of the things I was gonna bring up too, is like even going into like an energy healing session with a client, like, or someone just really wanting to sit with their own energy and tune into it. It's what's the intention? Intention is half of it.
Yeah.
That's really half of what we do is setting an intention.
Totally. That's so funny. And we were just having a conversation about that with Eileen. I was just on a call with Eileen McCusick and Angela Kent, and we were talking about intention in biofield tuning sessions. And intention is different than having an agenda. Like an intention is something, let's put this focus out there, or let's put this thought out there, but then let it go. Right. With no kind of no expectation of what the outcome is going to be. Having an agenda would be having a very specific expectation of what the outcome will be and trying to
Mhm.
get there. And it's not done in the right kind of space. It's not, when we have an agenda, we're not being curious, we're not deeply listening, we're not hearing what wants to happen. When we have that intention, it's like setting the focus and then letting it go and just seeing what presents and what arises.
And I don't know if this is the case for you, but I tend to, because my son was like, he's in college and he's like he's kind of a skeptic, and I'm actually a true I'm a skeptic too. Like
Yeah, me too.
I have to try it and I have to like be proven
Yep,
before
I'm
I'll
with you.
like share it with somebody else, or like I have to experience it first before I'll share it with somebody else. And but my son, he just it's like witchery, or it's like some sort of voodoo, like, do you have any idea what you're bringing into the space when you're doing this stuff? And I'm like, yeah, I absolutely do, because I open every session with a prayer. I
Mhm.
only ask for the highest, for my highest good and for the highest good of my client,
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
yeah,
well, that's good to know. Then he was okay with it. But it's like, it's again, that comes back to intention, and that we only want what's for the highest good of our clients and also for ourselves if we're, working on ourselves. So,
yeah, yeah. And so coming back to the walk or the exercise or whatever, if the intention is, well, now I need to beat myself up because I just did that thing, it's
mhm.
not going to be a very good walk or
No,
experience. You're probably
no.
not going to get a lot out of it except for just more beating yourself up. But if you go in, the intention is, I love myself. I love my body. I want to provide my body with this opportunity to move. It's going to be a lot nicer.
Yeah. And it's just like if we're going to have a difficult conversation with somebody, it's what is this has come up a lot in, just in relationships, right? For me
Mhm.
personally lately, it's what is the intention before I go to send that voice memo, or before I go to send that text? Like, what is the intention, or what is the energy that I'm in doing that? And I think
Yeah.
it's important for us as practitioners too, that before we come into a session, what is the energy that I'm in, right? What is my energy at right now before
Yeah.
coming into this? Because just as we can feel the energy of our clients, they can feel ours too.
Yes. I don't know if you've been experiencing this lately, but with the chaos of the world right now, which I try not to tune into too much, but it's palpable. I
Hmm.
can really feel it. Um, my energy levels have been just a little bit lower. And so I've been noticing myself like at the beginning of the day, just being like, I don't want to see clients. And I'm doing this whole whiny thing. And then I'm like, no, Jill, no, no, no. Like I kind of do this flip where I coach myself and I'm like, no, I chose this path. Like I want to help these people. I love it's just kind of like giving myself a little pep talk. I love doing this work and I'm not faking it when I say it, but it's just a matter of like kind of changing the narrative because I think it's the chaos of what's going on out there that's really informing my thoughts of being like no and whiny and
Hmm.
all that. So just kind of um what's the word I'm looking for? Like,
Shifting the energy.
yeah, shifting it or overriding that, and like coming into a more conscious and intentional place with how I want to be in my own life. Because, like you said, if I came into a session with clients being like, I don't want to, it's so they're not going to come back.
Mhm.
I wouldn't if I were them. Yeah,
Or how much of the session is being influenced by, like, how much of it is it your energy that's getting in the way, you know?
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Good stuff. Is there anything else you want to share about your journey before we disconnect?
I just want people who practitioners, because I think it's mostly practitioners, people in the energy healing work modalities that listen to your podcast, I imagine.
Mhm.
And I just want people listening to, it's so important for us as healers to heal ourselves first. And I think we can only sit with others in their lowest energy, right? Because they're coming to us low energy.
Mhm.
They need their, um, how do I want to say it? How does Eileen say it?
That she talks about voltage, so they're
Yeah,
battery charged.
yeah. They're
Yeah.
coming to us to get their voltage raised, right? And um, if we're not raising our own voltage, how can we expect to sit with them? And are we going to match? Like attracts like, right? So a session can either go one way or the other. It's either they're going to match ours or we're going to match theirs. Um,
Yeah,
Although at the
interesting.
same time, I get energized by sessions too. So,
Well, I think
oh,
part
I
of
guess.
that it's I think part of that is the sound, but I wonder if part of that, and I haven't thought about this before, so this is just like off the cuff, but I wonder if part of that feeling energized as a practitioner at the session is because we have been so intentional with our how we're using our energy. Like as biofield tuning practitioners, we are trained that when we're in sessions to really um, bring our own energy in and have it flowing through our central channel, and we intentionally connect to the earth and to the sun. We help the client do that too. So I'm wondering if it's that energizes us, is because we on some level take our power back, because we're being so conscious about how we're using that energy and how
That's
we're
true.
we're directing our own energy when we're like out in the, just, out in the world and not being intentional with that. I think it's so easy for us to leak some
Mhm.
energy and light and just
Or
kind of,
be a sponge.
or be a sponge, right? Yeah, yeah, take on a lot, which is draining.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a fascinating. Yeah, it's. I guess what have you found if you're having a? Have you ever canceled a session if you're having a really
Oh
difficult
yeah.
day or challenging? Not feel well. Of course, if you're not feeling well, it's.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I've had, you know, bouts of COVID or the flu, and I will cancel for sure. What I've learned too is that um if I'm feeling physically unwell, to just don't overthink it. Don't try and wait till just cancel everything that day and give yourself the opportunity to rest so that you bounce back. Cause I've done it before. I've just dragged it out, just canceled one client and then the next, like over time, just think, maybe I'll feel better. Maybe I'll feel better. And it just prolonged, I think, the
Mhm.
illness. But yeah, emotionally, like, I remember my husband and I getting into a big fight about something. It was probably really dumb, but we were both emotionally upset. And I think when you fight with your spouse, it's just really upsetting. And I couldn't quite come to neutral. So in those instances, I'll cancel. But if I'm just feeling like a little off, usually a sessional. help me get back to the right spot. How about you?
I've actually, mm, I have not been sick since 2022,
Wow. How'd you do
and I had
that?
COVID. I had COVID, but
Yeah.
it was actually my son had a really traumatic accident that it's changed his life, but he's good now. But that's when I got COVID. It was like my system was just
Oh,
in
I
complete
see.
overload. I had a canker sore that was like the size of Texas in my that was horrible. It was so stressful. No wonder I got COVID.
Wow.
But yeah, I haven't had it since, and I no flu, colds, nothing. It's like,
Wow.
yeah, I don't know. Knock
Huh.
on wood, like I said.
Yeah.
But I really do contribute the work that I do to, to that, like, and recognizing when I need to rest before it gets to that point, I think, where I do get
Yeah.
sick.
Right.
And I've really looked at my schedule, and this is great for practitioners listening too. It's like I'm trying to find ways that I can work with my energy because I know that um, I need more rest than some. Human design has helped me recognize that. And even as a kid, like I needed a lot more sleep. And even as an adult now, I need more rest than maybe
Mhm.
some other people. And so working with that and understanding that about myself, well, how can I make that work with my life because I have a day job. I have 3 kids, one's in college, one's going to be going to college. I'm a spouse. Um, I do my healing work. I have my podcast. Like I have a lot of irons in the
Yeah.
fire, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's like, how do I manage it all? Well, I think where I started was looking at my energy and what am I choosing to put my energy toward? What are my
Hmm.
priorities? And then looking at my schedule, and I only do one energy healing session per day. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Typically I only do one podcast recording per day. That's it.
Yeah.
Like I really limit what I do. And it's like, well,
Which
how can
helps you
I
to be able to do a lot because you know how
yeah.
to sparse it out.
And so now I'm looking at how can I help more people in a shorter amount of time or in a same amount of time. And so I'm working on something right now to do
Oh.
that with energy work that works around my life and my energy so that I can show up and really come to this work with more play and creativity. And so that's what I'm working on right now. So
I love that. Oh, I'm excited to hear more about that. What is your
I,
human design? Oh, go ahead.
I'm a 4/6 emotional manifester.
Oh, see, I don't know I know I'm a manifesting generator, but I don't know the numbers or there might be something about a sacral in there. Does that make sense?
Okay, you're a sacral authority probably then.
Yeah, I think so.
And yep. So
Yeah.
like for me, I'm an emotional authority. So I have to ride before making decisions and stuff. I have to ride the emotional wave, which has been a huge, huge game changer in my life.
Mm.
I need to be in a neutral place before I make a decision. I can't make a decision on an emotional high, and I shouldn't make a decision on emotional low. And
Mhm.
that's really helped me um, I mean, even for business, it's huge. That's a huge, just even knowing your authority alone is a game changer, especially if you own a business. And
Yeah.
if you're in relationships, which most of us are. So,
Yeah, yeah.
because where there's conflict, right, is when, let's say, now sacral and splenic are kind of similar in a way. Sacral, it's like your body speaks. It's it's either an uh-huh or a no.
Yeah.
And where splenic, it's like instant and it's your body's not going to tell you more than once. But sacral is like if I ask you a question and you tune in, like, how does that feel in your body? Is that a yes or a no? Like, do you want to go out to dinner tonight? No.
Oh, I was like,
You're
yes.
feeling okay. So you feel like, yes, let's go, let's do this. That's
Yeah.
your sacral. Whereas
Mhm.
if you said, if you're like, no, in your body, like,
Yeah.
no, but you said yes, that
Yeah.
is not, you're not
Huge
going to feel
energy
good.
drain.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh,
So
that's
you're
really cool because that affirms what I was saying earlier about how biofield tuning has helped me is to know my yes and my no in my body.
bingo,
Yep. And to
bingo.
trust it.
Yes. And so how it's helped me as a manifester, emotional manifester is okay, recognizing the emotion and what that emotion feels like in my body. So it's like, for example, like I can like I'll have this feeling come over that actually just happened not that long ago. I don't know, it was just like this overwhelming like sadness just came over me. And I even said to my daughters, like, we were driving somewhere, and I'm like, "Ah, I don't know. I just feel like this sadness. She's like, about what? I'm like, I don't even know. And it's like, okay, well, that wasn't even mine. I was thinking
Mm,
about my son, but I
mm,
think that wasn't even my sadness. I was
mm,
feeling something from him. You know what
mhm.
I mean?
Yeah.
So it's even recognizing like what is mine and what isn't. That's where, energy work and biofield tuning has helped me kind of tune into too.
Yeah. So helpful. Do you do the what's it called? Human design like for your clients, or is that more a tool for you?
That's still a playground for me.
Mhm.
I do so like with my grief clients for sure. I will ask them their details because you need your date of birth, your time of birth, and your place of birth. And it really does matter your time of birth because that can change your gates and channels of your human design. And and there's guidance. I think if you go, I mean, just Google it. Like if you don't know your time of birth, there's guidance on what to do with that. But if you can find it, that's important to know, not to guess on that. Um, but yeah, with my grief clients, I do. I have had a few clients, energy clients that when I was especially first kind of dabbling into it, I would ask them. And actually, one in particular I can think of right now, and she was a projector. And I'm like, that makes so much sense. And so I was kind of coaching her around her energy as a projector because like manifestors, projectors need a lot of alone time
Mm,
and need time to be with themselves and can feel very drained if they're peopling a lot. So,
mhm.
and in order to tune into themselves, manifestors and projectors, that's where they're a lot alike. We need that time alone to be introspective and reflective. And that's how we come, that's how we set and reset and recharge.
Yeah. I could see that being so helpful for somebody who's in their grief, like, when it's acute, knowing that about them, because I think in some cultures anyway, it's like surround the person who's grieving, like be with them, don't leave them alone. But if someone maybe who's in that culture knows that about themselves, that they will actually do a little bit better having some alone time than being able to ask for that, or tell people like I need some alone time.
Well, and so one of the other aspects of grief recovery that I've incorporated into my grief work is called UMAP. And that's actually uses four different assessments, including Clifton strengths. You get your top five strengths, and then you um, glean your top 10 values and your preferred skills, least preferred skills, and then your personality and how you're wired. That's actually also another element that I bring into the work that I do because when your values are being dishonored by somebody else, such as, let's say, honesty in your relationship with somebody, and they're not being honest with you, or they flat out did lie to you and they told you they lied to you, that's not honesty is a reciprocal value. So
Mm,
if, and you can dishonor your own values, let's say growth, for example, because your podcast is about growing a practice. And, I'm growth is one of my values. So if I'm growing and evolving and like looking into personal development, but my spouse isn't, and that's not, and we're kind of growing at different paces or different, that can create some friction or that can create some
totally.
disconnection and things like that. So, but I don't know where I was going with that. But when it comes to then human design, um, depending on what your gates and channels are and your authority. So take authority, for example, too. Like, let's say you are a sacral and I'm an emotional, and we're in a relationship where your spouse is the opposite of you. You're going to have an answer like that, or a
Mhm.
splenic will for sure.
Mhm.
I'm not. I might
Mhm.
take 2 or 3 days or even 2 to 3 weeks to come to a
Mm.
decision.
Yeah.
So if it's a decision like, should we move? I'm going to need to ride my emotional
Yeah.
wave. Whereas, that can create conflict.
Totally. I could see that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
It's all
it
good to know.
all of these tools, like human design or UMAP, can reveal to us where the conflict is.
Yeah.
But then when you know what the conflict is or what the root of it is, then you know what to work on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Not some big mystery.
Yeah.
Why can't we agree on something? Or why can't we come to a decision together? It's like,
Why
oh,
is
this
this
is why.
always an issue? Why is this
Yeah.
always coming
Yeah.
up? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
tools out there that can help you figure that out. And especially like if you're in business for yourself and you're a solopreneur, you know, do you need a coach? Sometimes you don't. Sometimes the answer is just knowing yourself better. And,
Right.
not
Love that.
saying, yeah, but I've hired coaches. So, I mean, I'm not, yeah, sometimes you
Yeah.
need a coach because you can't see the label from inside the jar either, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. But right. You don't always need one. Like
Yeah.
there's times when you do and times where you can learn how you best make decisions and learn
Hmm.
about your emotions. Yeah. And go from there. Um, I know that we're at like
Oh,
an hour.
wow.
It's totally okay.
I'm good.
I wanted you to talk a little bit more about your you have a grief, you said grief recovery program.
Yeah. So
So interested.
okay. It's called Do Grief Differently. And it's
Hmm.
12 weeks one-on-one. And I do that virtually. And then I can also do groups in person or online as well. But yeah, that's my like flagship um, offering for my grief work. And it includes grief recovery method, which is you work through two really difficult relationships. They can be with someone living or someone who has passed.
Hmm.
And then we also you learn your UMAP. So we start with UMAP, we go into grief recovery, and then we end with UMAP. So it's kind of like this. Um, UMAP helps you better understand where there might be grief that you didn't realize,
Yeah.
and we end with it because after you've really released a lot of this emotional stuff, it's like, okay, well, what's next?
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's
UMAP is,
cool.
yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I love the way that I've listened to your podcast and the way that you talk about grief is let's talk about grief like we talk about the weather.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good.
Let's normalize
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And I'll just add all emotions to that because grief is one and then oh my gosh, there's just so many that aren't talked about because I think it's definitely changing, but in the past it's like you're supposed to be happy all the time.
Well, and anger is bad,
And
and that
anger is
that's
bad.
that's
Yeah.
that was a
Yep.
belief that I was around a lot of anger. And
Mhm.
so I stuffed my own anger because I saw the impact it had, not only on me, but in the household, right? And so when you stuff anger, it's like poison that you take, you know. Um, we say resentment is poison you take, hoping the other person dies, actually.
Right.
But anger is like a poison too.
Wow. Yep. Yeah.
And it's not like it's anger stuffed down becomes the poison, right? But
Yeah.
anger can actually be really great fuel
Totally.
for change and transformation, which is
Yeah.
what it was for me.
I started to look at what all the emotions, all the uncomfortable emotions are trying to tell us. And they all have an important role, shame included. I know a lot of
Hmm.
people are like, no, shame is not useful. And actually, it is useful. It helps us to stay in integrity. And to, like, I was talking to Eileen today, she talked about shame and she was like, if I didn't have shame, then if my kitchen were a mess and my whole house were a mess and I was just being a slob, then like I wouldn't care about it. But like if somebody walked in, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? It keeps us, in check,
Yeah.
but we don't
I
want to overindulge in it.
Yeah. And that brings up a good question I'll ask, because people
Mhm.
listening who listen to my podcast, they'll and people who listen to yours already know this, but people that listen to mine may not. Can you
Mhm.
just talk a little bit about the emotions and where we tend to find them in the body?
Oh, yeah. So, just like we have an anatomy in our body, right? We all have our hearts are all in the same place, maybe give or take a centimeter or millimeter or two. Brains are all in the same place. We also have an emotional anatomy that's stored within our biofield. And so this was discovered by Eileen McCusick, who we've been talking about. She's the founder of Biofield Tuning. She found that we store like sadness, grief, and loss over to the left of the shoulder, left side of the heart chakra. We store saying yes when we mean no, or resentment over on the right side of the heart chakra. Um, we store a pattern of busyness, overdoing, overthinking off the right side of the hip. Uh, Frustration and disappointment off the left side of the hip, as well as unmet needs. And I won't go into the full map here, but we can map all the way from the feet to the head where certain emotions are stored. And so, if those of you who are listening, if you have a body part that's been ailing you for some time, it may be emotional. It probably is. There's probably some emotional significance there. And so, if you're a listener of Victoria's, she can surely guide you there. If you want to reach out to her, if you've had a shoulder that's been bothering you for a long time. A lot of us have right shoulder issues. Caretakers do. So moms, those who are in the caring profession, because that's the shoulder of our um, over caretaking for others' emotional needs and putting other people first instead of ourselves. It's a really common one. Wanted to point that out. A lot of right hip stuff in the world too. The right hip busyness, overdoing, overthinking. Got to stay busy to stay productive, to be worthy. So right hip could be indicative of that. Yeah, I think I already talked about the right hip, but that's a really common one. Really, really common. A lot of hip replacements are done in the right hip in our culture.
And often too, I've found too, like with clients, like if they are having like headaches on the left side of their head, the right hip
Yeah.
is, yeah,
Yeah.
you
So
often
left
see it
side
on the
of the head
opposite.
is worrying about the future. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yep. And they go together, right? Worrying about the future, overthinking, staying busy, staying productive.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was mind blowing to me when I first learned about the anatomy app. And yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah, it's fun to just carry around like a little mini version of the map. And I travel a lot, teaching biofield tuning, and my whole family lives on the East Coast, so we're out there at least once a year. But strike up a conversation in an Uber or on a plane, and it's like, oh, my left elbow or whatever, and just pull
Mhm.
out the map. Go, could it be related to this? Like what?
Yep. I actually have it in my Google Drive, so I can
Oh, nice.
always, yeah,
There you
access
go.
it there. Yep.
Pull it up on your phone or
Yep.
tablet.
Yep.
Yeah. Nice.
Well, this has been so fun, and I hope that your listeners, other practitioners out there, have learned a little bit about grief and how it can show up in your practice. Because actually, I've had several of people come to me for energy work, and they end up doing the grief work with me.
Yeah, it makes a lot of
Um,
sense.
because oh, I haven't thought about that in a long time. Or it brings up stuff, sessions and energy work can bring up some stuff. And um, so I've often found that, the grief work kind of follows the energy work sometimes. Or it can go the opposite too. Like people that have worked with me in the grief work, like, oh, I just really just want to like up level my, I've done all this emotional stuff and done all this work. Now let's raise my voltage, right? So it kind of goes hand in hand. Um, and I know my listeners heard from you in a way that you explain it differently than I do, and probably how better than I did, because I love the whole cell tower analogy. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, and I guess I'll just add one. I know we're trying to like wrap this up, but I can't stop like talking and coming up with things to talk about. But kind of how I see like grief connected with the work that we do in energy work and biofield tuning is when we have these experiences that maybe aren't necessarily like someone passing away, but even the things like, how I mentioned in the beginning of the episode where there's like this lack of connection that all of a
Mhm.
sudden I'm sensing, these moments in time where we experience stress, we're also experiencing some sort of soul loss as well. It feels like that's it. When we experience stress, we emit light particles, we emit biophotons. And so those little biophotons that are supposed to be, running through our center, and they're now kind of outside of our body, stuck in our field. They're still with us, but they're just kind of orbiting around our field rather than being center. So that can be, just these experiences we have that maybe we wouldn't consider them a loss. I mean, essentially that is what they are, or it's a loss of light. Um, and I think it's when we return that light, that's the process of biofield tuning is locating that light in the field and bringing it back to the body. That's when we realize like, oh, like now I feel at home, like, or now I feel whole again. So just something else to kind of consider when it comes to grief and loss is like you always talk about, it doesn't have to be this big tragic loss, but it's just sometimes these little like moments in time where we lose parts of ourself. And if we do that frequently and often, I'm sure grief would absolutely present.
It's like, that was so good. It's like dying from 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah.
And, and really, I'll share with your listeners too. I mean, the definition of grief is the loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations,
Mhm.
and anything that you wish would have been or could be different, better, or more.
Yeah,
So
that
that's
makes
a
sense.
lot. That's a lot of
Totally.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of things. So that's why processing grief is so important because it's pervasive, really. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you're doing this work, Victoria. That's awesome.
Well, and thank you for teaching and expanding biofield tuning. I'm glad I'm so thankful it came into my awareness. I'm actually the 144. When I first heard it, I was like, what is it? Yeah, the
Yeah, that's
144.
that's the
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, that's the emotional one.
Yeah.
I like when I first heard that, I was like, but it's like the one that when that comes up, and I don't know if you do this, but I don't choose the fork for my
Yeah.
sessions.
Yeah.
I let my pendulum do that,
Okay. Yep.
and it never fails. The 144 is only after they've had several sessions with me does that one come up, or they've done a lot of energy healing work before coming to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
that's been a fascinating connection for me to draw with that fork. It's one of my, and maybe it's who I draw to me, right? Because of the grief stuff that could be.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's often the go-to for me in my work.
Yeah, I
The
love
fork.
that fork. I call it my bestie. Um, but I hated it when I first got it. I was like,
Hmm.
what is wrong with this fork? It sounds terrible. And then I just kept using it and I was like, oh my gosh. That's why I only work with the 3 forks now. I think we were talking about that
Hmm.
before we started recording, but in biofield tuning, there's like a set of, well, it keeps getting bigger, but it was just a set of 5. Um, including the 2 weighted forks, the 174, 528, and 417 hertz. And then we added this 144. And it was just I was just using the 144 and 174. And now I've added the 222. But I have a whole solfeggio set on its way to me too. I'm like, I'm
Ooh.
so excited. Yeah, let's see how I had to order an extra carrying case because I'm gonna run out of room.
I find too that I'm using the weighted forks a lot on the body as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
Um, when um, sometimes that just comes up to be used. So yeah, I don't know. People listening, like I love my pendulum. Like the pendulum is my BFF in sessions. I feel like it's not my energy then, getting in the way, or it's like I'm not making the decision. Like my client's energy is guiding the session, I feel
Yeah,
like.
yeah,
And that when
yeah.
I let the pendulum, when yeah, I don't know.
That's a nice way to approach a session because it's like if you don't have to think about anything
I
and you
don't.
just follow, it saves you energy. And it's just such a more enjoyable session because there's like no need to perform, which I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
a lot of practitioners can get kind of stuck in like needing to perform. When that's not what it's about. Just it's about listening.
Yeah, and I think that's where, especially when I was first new, like you feel like you have to do it this certain way and it's this prescribed way.
Mhm.
And I was just like, I don't know, would the pendulum say if that's the one I should use? And I even like drawing a card for somebody. Like I use oracle cards and I'll draw a card for somebody. The pendulum is deciding what deck. Even when I
Mm,
draw a card for myself, yeah, it's the pendulum. So
yeah,
if you're
nice.
not using your pendulum, play with it a little bit more. I just,
Yeah,
if you're listening
yeah,
to this.
good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Victoria. This is
Yes.
lovely.
Thank you. I look forward to sharing this on my podcast. People can learn more in depth about biofield tuning and energy and all of that because I'm trying to bring more of that into my podcast too because it is, how do you want to say it? Like emotions involve our bodies, right? It's an
Totally.
energetic experience, and so I think there's the two
Yeah.
married together is yeah.
Yeah. Emotions are electromagnetic. And
Mhm.
so energy work is working on that spectrum. Um, so even just feeling your own emotion, even just allowing your own emotion is energy work. So good job.
That's true. Well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast, and thank you for being on mine. And yeah, just thank you for this opportunity. I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, thank you. It's just always so good for my audience to hear from other practitioners who are doing the work in the world and what their journey has been and what their your perspective has been on the work. And it's been great to hear from you. So thanks, Victoria.
Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
Oh yes, good question. You can find me at jillianfaldmo.com. And you?
Well, where are you on social? Are you on social?
I am on social. I'm not the most active, but you can find me there. Jillianfaldmo.coaching on Instagram. And then Facebook, I think it's just Jillian Faldmo. Um, but I'm all about teaching people marketing without killing themselves on social media.
Not my favorite either. I have a VA and gosh, when I got a VA, that was yeah, for your listeners too on, building your practice and stuff. It's hire that stuff out. Like you don't have to do everything, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
But yeah, I am at theunleashedheart.com. Theunleashedheart.com. My website and link to my podcast, Grieving Voices, is on there. And the book that I wrote, I mentioned, is on there. And all my socials, you can find me there, are The Unleashed Heart on Instagram and The Unleashed Heart LLC on Facebook. And then I'm on LinkedIn too. But yeah, all the links are on my website though.
Awesome. Yeah, go check out Victoria's podcast, The Unleashed Heart. It's awesome.
And
So
Jillian's,
good.
if you wanna learn more about energy work and
Yeah. Awesome. All right,
Right.
everybody. Thanks for being with us. We
Yes,
appreciate
thank
you.
you. Much love.